I have just watched the latest program on the YouTube channel, Elvis is the Man, presented by David. And I must say, I am furious. Of all the days to release something like this, you chose the 49th anniversary of Elvis's death. My cousin has been gone 49 years. He cannot answer you, and he cannot defend himself. Yet, on the anniversary of his death, you choose to broadcast some of the most degrading claims about him and present them under the banner of research. I find that absolutely disgraceful. If you call yourself an Elvis fan, why choose that day to release something like that? Why not use that day to honor his life, his music, his generosity, his spirit? Instead, we get something dressed up as research. But what is research? Research isn't just repeating the most sensational version of events because it gets attention. Proper research means weighing evidence. It means taking into account medical evidence, even if it complicates your neat theory. There are physicians who have studied Elvis's medical history for years. You don't have to agree with every word of what they say, but you can't just pretend their work doesn't exist because it doesn't fit the narrative you're selling. Then there's this idea floated again as if it's an established fact that Elvis just mixed up his medication. Please tell me, why is that being stated as though it's proven? That is conjecture. Repetition doesn't turn a story into evidence. And I want to say something else about where so much of this material comes from. Over the years, we have heard story after story from certain former members of what became known as the Memphis Mafia. From former girlfriends, former associates, and yes, from Elvis's former wife. Books were written, interviews were given, appearances were made, and some extraordinarily private, sensational, and in my opinion, disgusting stories about Elvis were put into the public domain. Before Elvis died, most of the world had no idea who many of these people were. Elvis was the reason the world eventually knew their names. And that is something I find very difficult to forget. Elvis gave people around him a life that most could only have dreamed of. His generosity was legendary, sometimes generosity to a fault. He gave people homes, cars, jewelry, opportunities, travel, experiences, and a lifestyle that might never otherwise have been known to them. More importantly, he gave many of them his friendship, his trust, and his loyalty. And yet, after he died, when he could no longer answer back, some of the repayment for that trust and loyalty and friendship was to sell stories about the most intimate and humiliating aspects of his life. I know people will say, but if it happened, it's the truth. That phrase has become far too convenient. Because even when something is true, there is such a thing as loyalty. There is such a thing as privacy. There is such a thing as context. And then there is such a thing as human decency. And when that allegation is exaggerated, disputed, sensationalized, or impossible to substantiate, simply finding it written in somebody's book does not magically transform it into historical fact. And this is why I become so frustrated when I hear the word research used to legitimize these stories. If your research consists of opening books containing decades-old sensational claims and repeating the most degrading passages, I question, what are you actually researching? Where is the corroboration? Where is the independent evidence? Where is the medical evidence when medical claims are being made? And where are the voices that contradict the story? Most importantly, where is your judgment? Because Elvis Presley was not a commodity for everybody around him to keep selling pieces of him after he died. He was a human being. He trusted people. He loved people. He was extraordinarily generous to people. And he deserved better than to have that generosity and trust and loyalty that he gave repaid by having the most private aspects of his life packaged, sold, and endlessly recycled for public consumption. And then genetics. I hear people wave that away. In our family, heart disease and autoimmune illnesses are not theories. They're lived realities. My Uncle Vernon died of heart disease. His sister, my mother, also died of heart disease. My sister's diabetes led to heart complications. My brothers had diabetes and led to heart complications. My granddaughter is living with an autoimmune condition. I'm not standing here saying family history explains everything, but it is not remotely honest to dismiss it as irrelevant. Then we reach for what for me crosses a line. Claims about body odor and pills to cover it. That is demeaning. And it is not supported by recognized medical evidence. If someone is going to make a claim that degrading about a man who is no longer here to speak for himself, then the burden of proof is high. Tell me, where is that proof? Why, time and again, do we see the same pattern of selecting the most degrading stories, repeating them, and building a whole narrative around them? Now, I know what some people will say. Donna, we take the good with the bad. We still love him. And I do understand that. None of us, including me, is pretending Elvis was perfect. But taking the good with the bad is not the same as constantly dragging out the most humiliating version possible. That isn't balance. That's something else. And I find that deeply offensive. So my question is simple. If you're an Elvis fan, why are you so determined to reduce him to the most degraded version of his life? Why strip away his dignity? You can disagree with me, and you can challenge my view. That's fair. But don't call it a balanced research if what you're doing is recycling degraded stories and ignoring evidence that doesn't suit your narrative. I will never apologize for defending my family. And every single time Elvis Presley is unfairly degraded, humiliated, or stripped of his dignity, trust me, I will speak. Because silence would mean accepting it. And I never will do that. Thank you. God bless.